Have you ever walked out of a course or workshop inspired, full of ideas, ready to take action, only to realize a few weeks later that none of those plans actually materialized and somehow you slid right back into business as usual? If you have ever had that happen, first off, know this: you are not alone. It is incredibly common. And while there is a very real reason why this happens, there are also ways to prevent it. So let's talk about that. Hello there, friend. I am Dr. Laura Miner, a board certified leadership coach who helps people cultivate their inner leader for outer impact using the science of self-leadership. And what the research shows, and my client work and personal experience affirm, is that it's usually not the course or the book or even the quality of the material that prevents implementation. No, that actually comes back to the one common denominator that is present in every training you've ever taken, every book you've ever read, every workshop you've ever attended. And that is you. Not in a bad, you're the problem kind of way, but in a powerful way that speaks to how much influence you actually have over your own outcomes. You see, your inner leader is the one bringing meaning, action, and follow through to any type of learning you consume. But if that inner leader hasn't been cultivated to translate learning into action, then the material you ingest has no internal system or structure to cement it or to lock it in. And that's why your results can feel scattered or short-lived. This also explains why you can take amazing courses that inspire you in the moment, but yet still find yourself feeling stuck and unchanged. Because information is great, but it does not create transformation on its own. Transformation comes from something else, and that something else is self-leadership. And this isn't just my opinion or my bias as a self-leadership practitioner. This is backed by research. So a few years ago, a team of researchers reviewed 4 decades of self-leadership studies and trainings, 40 years worth. And what they found was absolutely fascinating. There were so many phenomenal insights, but the one I want to talk about today is the connection between self-leadership and learning. Their research showed that self-leadership acts as a moderator for everything you learn. So it essentially changes the relationship between what you learn and the results you're actually able to create. And it does so by creating an internal system for processing that learning. So you build a solid self-leadership foundation, your learning then filters through it, and this leads to higher implementation and more favorable outcomes. But let me give you an example to bring it better to life. 2 people go through the exact same training, a communication workshop to improve their leadership skills. They sit in the same room, hear the same ideas, capture similar notes, and walk out equally inspired. But once they get back to their day-to-day lives, their experiences are completely different. The first person gets swept back into their old patterns. Their inspiration fades, their ideas don't leave the pages of their notebook, and within a few weeks, life looks like it did before they went to the workshop. They slid right back into their patterns. The second person, on the other hand, filters that workshop through their self-leadership lens, and they immediately start putting their ideas into motion. Not perfectly, but consistently. They try things, they experiment, they adjust. They evaluate their thoughts, actions, and motivations around the training. And slowly, they start seeing real change. Both people got the same training and the same material, but they achieved wildly different outcomes. Why? Self-leadership. It is the mechanism that makes learning stick. With it, we become implementation masters, but without it, we can find ourselves locked in a pattern where learning does not translate to action. Maybe you've seen this pattern in your own life. It starts with consumption. We're excited to learn something new, so we consume relevant material. This moves us into the inspiration stage. And this stage feels really good because we can see the possibilities with what we're learning. But then comes the drop-off. Life gets busy, responsibilities pile up. That initial excitement fades. And instead of revisiting the same material and implementing what we learned, we move right into the next round of consumption with a new book, a new course, or a new training. That's why so many of our educational opportunities are left unfinished. But it's not because we lack discipline. It's simply because without self-leadership, without that inner structure supporting how you think, act, and motivate yourself, without this, implementation becomes incredibly challenging. You have the desire, you have the intention, you even have the information. But what is missing is the leadership system that helps you turn that information into transformation. So let's talk about that inner leadership system, which brings us back to the 3 pillars of self-leadership. Now, I've created a more in-depth video on the 3 pillars, which I'll link to in the description below, just in case you haven't seen it. But here is the Cliff Notes version. Pillar 1 is how you think. And this is the mental framework that determines whether a new idea becomes meaningful or forgettable. It's the beliefs that you carry. It's the way that you interpret challenges and the way you talk to yourself when the initial excitement wears off. Now, the second pillar is how you act. And this is the bridge between intention and execution. This includes behavioral strategies like self-cueing and designing your environment to support your goals. This is also where action becomes consistent instead of sporadic. And then finally, there is pillar number 3, which is how you motivate yourself. This is your inner fuel. This includes things like the natural reward strategies that help you stay engaged, the purpose you attach to your actions, and the enjoyment you infuse into your tasks so they don't feel like a grind. When these 3 pillars are strong, implementation isn't something you have to force. It becomes something you naturally do. And when this happens, learning sets in a whole new way, and your outcomes are transformed. Now, let's shift away from understanding why these patterns happen to what you can actually do about it. Because awareness is great, but we also need something that breaks us out of the consumption cycle and propels us into action. So the next time that you've got pages of takeaways and you're feeling that overwhelming sense that you need to implement them all, I want you to look at your list and choose just one. Just one concept or idea that is both doable and meaningful. Something that genuinely speaks to where you are and where you want to go and that aligns with your goals. Then set the rest of that list aside because your inner leader doesn't need volume. it needs clarity. And once you have clarity on which single idea you're going to implement, it's time to filter it through the 3 self-leadership pillars, starting with how you think. So ask yourself, why does this one idea matter? What could change if you implemented it? These 2 questions create meaning, and meaning fuels commitment. Then move on to pillar number 2, how you act, and choose one small behavior that would move this idea forward. Not a whole system, not a 5-step routine, just one small behavior that you can repeat with consistency. Because that one behavior practiced consistently over time, it will lead to meaningful results. But it's the consistency that can sometimes be a challenge, right? Well, not when you have self-leadership on your side. Which brings us to pillar number 3, how you motivate yourself. For this step, pull back the layers and ask yourself, what makes this behavior feel worthwhile? What gives it meaning? But don't just give a quick answer. I want you to dig deep and pull back the layers. You might even find that there are multiple reasons. Perhaps it's the ease it creates in your day, or maybe it's the confidence you feel after you've consistently practiced this behavior. Or maybe it's simply the act of following through and regularly checking it off your list, knowing that you are showing up for yourself. Whatever it is, get these motivations on paper so that you can return to them whenever you need to bolster your motivation. You'd be surprised by how helpful this little note can be for your future self. Now, I realize on the surface, this may seem like an overly simple exercise, but it is incredibly effective. And here is why. When you focus on just one idea and you run it through the lens of how you think, how you act, and how you motivate yourself, the 3 self-leadership pillars, when you do this, implementation stops feeling heavy and overwhelming. It suddenly becomes doable, repeatable, sustainable. And when you get into this space, transformation naturally happens. Not through consuming more information, but through intentionally applying one meaningful insight at a time. This is how your inner leader creates outer impact. So pick one idea, run it through the 3 pillars, practice it, and watch yourself break the pattern of consumption without implementation. Okay, if you want to take your self-leadership journey to the next level, click that subscribe button and hit the bell notification while you're at it. That way you know when my next video drops. And if you want to get into more self-leadership lessons right now, then check out this video here. It's all about how to trigger action when motivation fades. Because let's face it, motivation ebbs and flows, but work and life, they still have to happen. So watch this video to learn how to leverage self-leadership to overcome that hurdle. I will meet you there when you're ready. See you there soon.